Actually, this was the first short story that I turned in when I entered my MFA program. And, I expected it would be a short story, but it kind of went over surprisingly well with those peer readers. And I realized there's something here that people like. So, I went ahead and committed to it and spent the next, you know, year or so finishing this thing.
Hi, MC. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. So where are you talking to us from today?
I am in Ohio. I'm an
Okay.
Ohio-based writer.
Interesting, because the book that we're talking about is South Carolina.
Correct. Yeah, I spend some time down there, but I live in Ohio.
Okay. Are you a bit of a snowbird? Like, do you spend the warm months
Yeah,
down in the warmer climate?
correct.
Or
Yeah,
I guess the cold months in the warmer climate? That makes more sense.
it doesn't quite work out that way, but yeah, whenever I'm able, I head south.
Okay. So why don't you go ahead and tell listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's MC Schmidt. I'm an author and a writer. Had quite a few short stories published. I've written a few novels. Most are out of print at this point. My new novel is called The Decadence. It's just released by Library Tales Publishing. I have an MFA in creative writing from Miami University, married with 3 children. That's about as interesting as it gets.
Well, let's talk about the book we're talking about is The Descendants. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
The Decadence.
The Decadence. I said The Descendants tonight. Okay. Brain malfunction. There we go.
No, I have those all the time. That's no problem. But
The Decadence.
Correct. Yeah. So, The Decadence, it's a dark comedy. It's about a fast food franchisee in South Carolina, kind of an older, volatile fellow, outwardly very successful, but is just perpetually nagged by this feeling that he's never achieved the respect that he deserves, from his peers and his community and his family. So the book basically just chronicles some of the schemes that he comes up with to sort of gain this elusive respect, and they're pretty outrageous. Some questionable legality to some of them, and of course they're all doomed to fail. And
of course.
yeah, and it's very comedy forward book. It's fairly absurd, a lot of highbrow comedy, a little bit of lowbrow comedy. Characters are unique and I think hard to forget. At least I still remember them. So
Yeah. I have to say, despite my brain malfunction there, I was going to ask you, like, why The Descendants? I didn't understand it, but The Decadence makes much more sense to me.
yeah, there's some irony there in that title because it's so he makes his money in fast food, and then his wife, his partner, has an obsession with as seen on TV. So there's this kind of cheapness to they have this empire that's sort of built on cheapness, and it's only kind of ironically decadent, but I thought it was a fitting title for the humor of the book.
I enjoy it. I have to say, I haven't finished the book yet. I'm probably about halfway through it now. And I'm definitely getting like the Righteous Gemstones vibe. I don't know why, but that's kind of a vibe I'm getting from the characters.
Yeah, well, I haven't actually seen that show, but
Okay. My husband watches it. I usually watch it over his shoulder sometimes.
I've seen. I try not to look at customer reviews, but I
Mhm.
fail because when people are
Because you're
talking
human.
about you want to know what they're saying.
Right.
Um, and I've seen a lot of there's a I've seen Seinfeld and Schitt's Creek, and so there's
Mhm.
kind of a sitcom-ish quality to it, I suppose, that's
Mhm.
registering with people.
Okay. So what was the path you took to creating this book? How did this idea start for you?
Well, I used to work, actually a little while ago now, for a restaurant parts distributor, and they
Mhm.
mainly sold to one fast food chain. And there was a
Mhm.
franchisee who used to come in, and he was you know, I'm sure a perfectly nice man. I'm sure
Mhm.
he loved people and things and was kind in his own way. But when I saw him, he was always quite boastful and kind of volatile. In this
Mhm.
one very specific circumstance, when he would come in and interact with the staff of this company I worked for, and I started to try to amuse myself with, well, what must this guy be like in his real life? Like, if he acted like this all the time, how would
Mhm.
he be? And kind of started from there. I mean, as I mentioned, the main character of this book is a pretty. Um, I like to think of him as a guy you love to hate. Sympathetic in his own way, but not exactly likable. Um,
Right.
and that all began with this sort of lampooning I was privately doing of this man to get to get through having to interact with him. Uh,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun if he had an adult son who was exactly as volatile as him, but in a totally different direction? If he were
Uh-huh.
like an artist who was, you know, not this kind of bootstraps, self-made businessman guy, who always wants to tell you about how he's a self-made businessman. And
Mhm.
wouldn't it be fun to watch those two clash? And that's kind of how it all started.
Awesome. Um, Now, you said you were writing short stories too. Did you start writing short stories about this story? Did you jump right into long format?
Yeah, I started. Actually, this was the first short story that I turned in when I entered my MFA program. And
Mhm.
I expected it would be a short story, but it kind of went over surprisingly well with those peer readers. And
Mhm.
I realized there's something here that people like. So I went ahead and committed to it and spent the next you know year or so finishing this thing.
Awesome. I was going to ask also how long has this process taken you from like first idea to completion?
Well, the first idea, as I mentioned, it kind of began as this just kind of fun thing I was doing to get through
Mhm.
the day at
Right.
work. But I probably had some version of this idea for you know 5 or 6 years at this point, but I didn't start writing until maybe 2 years ago.
Okay. Did you do a lot of COVID writing?
I did. I do try to write every day anyway, but yeah,
Mhm.
I did for sure.
I find a lot of people I'm talking to lately is they all have like COVID books. They all have the books they finished during COVID because they had so much extra time.
Yeah, it's weird, because I had this thought of you know in a in 2020 I thought, well, it's going to take about 6 months, 8 months, 12 months before
Mhm.
we're just inundated with stories about plagues. So I tried
Mhm.
very hard not to write that, but um,
Mhm.
since then I just finished the book Severance by Lingma, um,
Mhm.
and it's a plague book and it's wonderful. And I think I might have had some bad instincts there. I maybe should have written my own.
I thought the same as you when lockdown was full underway. I was thinking like, you know what? In like 9 months instead of babies, we're just going to have a whole bunch of books about people getting sick and zombies and apocalypses.
Yep. And
And I haven't seen
surprisingly, we
any
still
of
have a
them.
stomach for it.
I know. Um when you're normally writing a story, I know you got it sounds like you got this idea from a specific set of circumstances, but do you normally start with theme, or do you start with plot and theme comes out of that?
Theme is definitely the last to come out of it. I tend to start with something very small, like a situation or even a sentence, or if it's a funnier story, maybe a joke, um,
Mhm,
something that appeals to me, and then I try to think, well, what scene can I build around this situation or this line of dialogue or this
mhm,
sentence, and kind of build the plot from there. And then usually when I'm some way into it, I can step back and say, all right, so what is this about? What do I need to
mhm,
go back and try to like bring out to make
right.
this actually about something?
I think one of my previous guests, had made either they were paraphrasing someone had already said, or if they had said themselves that they write for plot and edit for theme.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. I mean, it almost feels pretentious, I guess, for me personally. Not to, I'm sure
Mhm.
other people are probably better at me at this at me than this or than me. Sorry, um, getting
We
tripped up.
authors are great with words.
Yeah, I'm clearly a master of communication, but um, yeah, to say I'm going to write a story about loss. I'm going to write
Mhm,
the great story about loss. Seems like a thing someone I wouldn't want to know would do. Rather
mhm,
than like I'm going to write a story about this rabbit, and oh, it turns out the story about the rabbit is about loss.
mhm.
Try to bring out those elements later on.
Right. Yeah, I never know what the theme of my work is until I'm basically done and I'm going back through it.
Yeah.
I'm just writing down a story at that point.
Yep. Just telling a tale.
Mhm. How do you plot out your stories? Like, how in depth do you go, or do you plot at all?
Honestly, I try not to do it at all.
Okay.
I
You seem to be in the minority for that. I feel like a lot of people are in the opposite end. They're very, like, uh, make spreadsheets and everything for plots.
Yeesh. I see to me, and I might be. I don't know. I might be in the minority.
Mhm.
I read.
You're in the minority of people that I have talked to,
Oh,
let's
sure,
put it
sure,
that
sure.
way.
Oh, I'm not. I don't doubt that. I just don't know. Um,
Uh-huh.
so it seems to me that since I read a lot of fiction, I feel like if I
Mhm.
sat down, like if I had an idea and I sat down and say, all right, well, what would a writer do? Like where would a writer go with this? Um,
Mhm.
I would end up writing somebody else's story, or a story anyone could write,
Right.
something like that, as opposed to, I have this situation. I'm going to sit down and make whatever choice seems appropriate and do that.
Mhm.
You know, and the culmination of it is I end up in some place I never expected, and maybe for all I know, it's not as good as if I sat down and plotted in advance.
Right.
But you know, it's my story, and
Right.
it's I guess if there's a fine line, I guess where I want people to like it, and I try very hard to make
Mhm.
what I'm writing, you know, appealing. But at the same time, I don't want to say, well, what is the best thing to do to make the most people enjoy this? Do you know what I mean? I feel,
Mhm. Yeah, I
plot-
understand.
yeah, plotting would lead me down some safer road, and
Mhm.
it's not. I'm not pursuing a bestseller. I'm pursuing the
A
best
good
version.
story.
Yeah, the best version of a story that only I can tell, I guess.
Mhm. I also think, The Decadent strikes me as a one-off, like, I don't will there be a sequel? Question mark.
Um, I don't think so.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I got the impression that it was just like a one story, and
Yeah,
perhaps plotting is more, important to people who are writing a series maybe, where they have to think of far arcing plots possibly?
yeah, that would make sense. I do have. quite a bit that I ended up cutting out, which I thought, well, maybe I'll make, you know, a
Mhm.
short story out of some of these, so the characters might find their way into something else eventually, but
Mhm.
it's not a thing I'm
Yeah,
planning.
wait, put it in your, to use later in another story folder.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those kill your darling situations where like I cut
Mhm.
stuff out, but there's stuff there that I like, so I thought, surely I can use this somewhere.
Right.
You know,
I think I ran into that recently. I was working, I had the story I keep reworking and reworking, and I finally cut the first line that I ever wrote in that story, and it's like my husband's like, "You can use it in another story somewhere, that's fine." I'm like, "But you don't understand, it was the first thing I came up with," and it just
yep,
like a stab to the heart.
yeah. Oh, and I know that part of what part of the challenge of this of writing, I think, is kind of learning to like let that kind of thing go. Like I try
Mhm,
not to. I know people, writers who like they wrote this novel and they love this novel and they're just all I'm gonna like this is my novel.
mhm,
I try to take the attitude of like, okay, well that's a thing I finished, and now hopefully it does well and gets to the most readers it can find, but
mhm.
it's dead to me, and there's no sentimentality. What's next uh,
Mhm,
is what I aim to do. Not always successful at it though.
mhm. I feel similarly when I'm writing short stories. It's like, "Okay, that was a thing I did, and let's move on to the next thing."
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of short stories, you said this started as one. What was your process converting the short story to long format?
Well, the short story was a an early draft of the first chapter,
Okay.
which is kind of odd now because I rewrote that chapter a bunch of times and now it's nothing at all like
Mhm.
the short story was, except for
Mhm.
there's one central conversation between the main character and his son that remains, but everything else is totally different. So it was
Mhm.
really, just like anything else, like, okay, well, where did I stop writing last night? And like what makes sense as the first sentence that I'm going to write tonight, and where does that take me? It's just
Mhm.
kind of building it, sentence by sentence until it is eventually in some other place with some other, you know, um, situation or whatever. And yeah, it was kind of taking a look at it and saying, well, what do I have? What's the tone? How do I how do I stick with this tone and kind of project this into a wider space?
Mhm. You mentioned writing tonight. I take it then you write in the evenings?
I do. Typically, I have trouble sleeping. I always have.
Mhm.
Um, so I tend to write when everyone else goes to bed, and
Mhm.
that's usually around 10 o'clock or so, and I'll write until around midnight if it's an average night, or if it's a good night, maybe into the morning.
That's not a bad chunk of time. How many words are you getting out of that on average?
Uh, well, I tend to write kind of carefully and slowly. Like I know people who will just bang out that first draft and to get as many pages as possible, but I'm
Mhm.
more of a person who stares into space for minutes at a time and then writes a sentence. So I'm probably getting around 750 to 1,000 words a night.
Okay, that's not bad. Um I was recently talking to another author, and he impressed me so much. He's writing like 3,000 words a day, and I'm like, oh my God, tell me your secret. How do you get
Yeah,
that many words out?
yeah. I like a lot of people. I read Stephen King's book on writing,
Hmm.
and I forget now as I sit here what the number. I don't know if he counts it in pages or words, but He said, "Well, like a good night is like 40,000 pages." And I'm like, you know,
That's a whole novel in one
yeah,
night.
but why don't you convert this into like human terms? Like,
Right.
what should we expect to be able to do if we're not Stephen King?
Mhm.
I wrote 4 novels last night.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know I struggle to get usually about a well, when I'm writing, I struggle to get about 1,000 a day, and that's just, luck of the draw between kids at school and work and everything else.
Yep.
So how have you found that your writing's changed over time? Well, I guess first of all, maybe we should ask how long have you been writing?
Um, I have been writing for gosh, since I was a teenager. So at this point, 30 years. Uh,
Okay.
I started out writing rhyming children's poems, oddly, which
Okay.
a couple of
I
which,
was gonna ask if you remembered what your first thing you wrote was.
yeah, yeah. So a, a few, I guess, I think three actually got published in various places. But
Oh, nice.
then I transitioned to adult uh, prose, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a common. I've read or heard a lot of people say that they all started, or that these particular people started out um, trying to emulate Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Like, there's some kind of
Mhm.
specifically romantic, uh, thing about that time and place, I guess, that appeals to some of us.
Mhm.
But I started out the same way, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to write this great, important literature."
Mhm.
If you cut to today, I'm talking to you about a story that has a taxidermied rabbit with no ears. Uh, so not a serious literary writer. I guess the answer to your question is I kind of learned that I'm not good at that. Like I can emulate that
Mhm.
voice, but I can't produce that literature. I realized that I'm kind of better positioned in more of a humorous space,
Mhm.
and once I realized that, you know, I think I've developed some pretty good skills in those areas.
Mhm.
So
How how long did it take you to find your voice? Like,
uh,
if you were emulating Hemingway first?
too long, a long, long time, and
That's usually the case.
frustrating. Yeah, um, it was it was a long. I'm surprised I stuck with it. Actually, it's it was a situation where like all right, yeah, it's fine. This is a fine story. There are like three good sentences in this story, but
Mhm.
otherwise, who cares? And that was the way for a long, long time. And at some point, I realized that kind of in my life, I tend to you know hide behind humor and like try to be witty. And when I started incorporating that into stories, it all kind of unlocked a little bit.
Mhm. Do you have anyone in your life that reads for you and helps you, I don't know, hone your tone?
Um, Off and on, I have, yeah. My Obviously my wife reads everything, but I have some
Mhm.
peer readers as well who I know won't hesitate to tell me when I'm terrible, which is
Mhm. Oh, that's so important.
yeah, it's so useful. Uh, and I feel bad because I'm kind of I try to be sort of kind. Like I have a hard time. Like all I want is for them to say, you know what, this is terrible, and I have such a hard
Uh-huh.
time saying, like reciprocating and saying, oh,
Right.
this isn't great. I was like, well, I see what you're trying to do here, and maybe it's just me,
Mhm.
but as opposed to the useful advice, which is you went wrong here. You should probably fix it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That I am right with you in that on that boat, like, when I have someone read it, I want them to tell me where it went wrong, like, that's all I need out of it.
right.
but at the same time, when you're giving them advice, you're like, "Oh, I really liked how you did this," and then you try to, like, sugarcoat the bad stuff, and I can't seem to get out of that habit of being, like, nice.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
oh no, that makes perfect sense. I'm always excited when someone sends me something to read, and
Mhm,
I always enjoy, you know, like just having the respect of that person. It's a gift,
mhm.
and then um, it's so hard to. I reread those notes over and over and over. Like, am I being too mean? Am I being it's dumb?
It's so hard. We want them to be mean to us, but we can't be mean in return.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I deserve it in fairness, and they don't. So,
Um, we're currently marketing, The Decadence. What's your favorite way to market this work so far?
I mean, the obvious correct answer is this podcast, but
Yes,
um,
very true.
the truth is, I find everything about marketing to be extraordinarily uncomfortable and
Uh-huh.
out of my comfort zones. Um,
I feel like 99% of authors give the exact same answer. Like,
oh, well, that's
we
good.
all love the writing and we all hate the marketing, and nobody knows what the hell they're doing.
Yeah. There's a. I mean, I don't know this for fact, but I mean, it just
Mhm,
seems to me there's got to be some correlation between a person who's kind of humble and good in isolation, wanting to write, you know,
mhm.
uh, not
Not
being.
realizing there's this whole thing of you have to be also social and interact with
Yeah,
people and tell them about your work.
yeah, like that's. Can I hire? Like I would. Like a Cyrano
Right.
de Bergerac situation would be perfect for me, where I'll do the work and then you can go like be the charming guy.
Mhm. Is this self-published, or are you publishing through an agency or
It
a house?
it's published through a boutique publisher called Library Tales Publishing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you I don't know. I never know how to phrase this question. It's like, did you approach them or do you have an agent who then approached them?
I approached them.
Okay.
It's it's kind of a
It's so
niche.
complicated these days, how just the different ways you can do this.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's kind of a niche humor book. Like a lot of people, and I've seen this in some customer reviews. You say, "Oh, it's a humorous book," and a lot of people
Mhm.
think, "Well, it's a cozy romance or whatever." Like there's a
Right?
it, it's not that at all. It's a kind of it's for a specific sense of humor, and it's not necessarily kind of uh, kind of skewed for like a broad audience.
Mhm.
It's for the right audience, and
Right.
so I looked for publishers who were doing kind of niche humor, and Library Tales was one of those. And
Mhm.
I approached them, and I got along with them when they called me back, and yeah, so that's
Excellent.
that's what I went with.
Well, I have to say, if this ever gets optioned and turned into any kind of visual format, my husband would love it. He is not a reader. I'm a writer who'd married a non-reader, but this is exactly his type of humor, and I've been kind of pestering him like, "You should read this. You would love this."
He doesn't work in Hollywood, does he? This could be a
No, no, he's in marketing.
kismet.
Yeah, but he's, like, in industrial marketing, so completely not helpful.
Yeah. Well, too bad, but that's very
Yeah.
nice of you. Thank you for saying so.
So what were your biggest influences for this book and any, I guess, short stories behind? Do you have I know you mentioned, like, the Hemingway, the connection before, but anything else?
Yeah, well, so that stuff, as great as those guys are, it almost feels like juvenile. Like that was a part of my.
Oh, okay.
No, oh no, no, no. Huge influence, but I tried so.
You grew out of it.
Yes, tried so long to emulate it and failed. There's I guess a bit of I don't know, some kind of block there. But Um, then I found Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller, and they kind of changed my life. And
Mhm.
these days, there's so many kind of funny writers. Alyssa Nutting and George Saunders and Luke Geddes and Kevin Wilson and all those guys. Um, you know, if you're trying to write humorous fiction, all of those people are kind of the standard, in my opinion, these days.
Mhm.
And then there's so many great writers these days, like Jennifer Egan and Lydia Millett and people like this who uh, keep me trying to be better all the time.
Mhm.
Like, oh, this we can be this good. I guess I should try to be that good.
What are you currently working on? I'm obviously marketing The Decadence, but are you doing a writing project in the background as well?
Oh yeah. So I've taken this week to assemble and edit a short story collection. Um,
Okay. Those are
but
always fun.
yeah, that's kind of like the novel is kind of the premier form, I guess. But for me,
Mhm.
short stories are more of a passion. It's so hard to do it well, and I want so much to be
Mhm.
someone who can do it well. So I spend a lot of my time writing short stories, and I think this collection is pretty good. Um, but then I also have the first draft of a young adult paranormal novel that
Interesting.
may or may not be anything. I don't know, but it exists, and uh, has a beginning, middle, and end. It might be
Mhm.
terrible. I haven't read it. I don't know.
Okay, interesting. I like that you're jumping genres like that.
Yeah.
And can I say how much I love short stories? They're like a little, like, snack of reading, like, you can just devour one, you get the whole story arc all in one go. I love them.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's true what you say. But it's a form that you can read that same story over and over and over when it's
Oh,
done
yeah.
well, and you
The good
realize,
ones change every time you read them.
yeah, the depth of it. I don't claim to do it well, but boy, would I like to.
Mhm. Yeah, I can only I think I can only think probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 that have been that good that every time I read them, I get got something else out of them. But yeah, when you find those are gold.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, we have reached the end of our Q&A. Where can listeners connect with you online?
Um, I'm on Twitter, technically.
Technically?
I mean, I have an account. Do I post there?
Mhm.
Sometimes, I guess. Uh, at MC Schmidt 12, I think. And if not,
Mhm. Okay.
I'm sure
I
it's,
will include it in the show notes, so in case you're wrong, the correct one will be in the show notes.
and if I'm wrong, I'm sure whoever MC Schmidt 12 is a perfectly
We'll
lovely.
be delighted.
Yeah, go there. Talk to him or her. I don't know. That's about it, really. I think I technically have an Instagram, but my wife set that up, and I don't think I've ever even been there. So uh,
Okay.
Twitter is the answer.
And where can they get a copy of The Decadents, not The Descendants?
uh, Amazon would be the obvious place it's available for Kindle Unlimited, Kindle paperback, and there's a hardcover, I think, still available. You can also, we're in select indie bookstores, but you'd have to look it up, in your area to see
Mhm.
if it's there. If not, I'm sure they can order it. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, as someone who has not finished the novel yet, but I'm really enjoying it so far, I've actually already got a couple people pegged who are getting this for Christmas. It's pretty good.
Oh, that's very nice. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I have quirky friends and I know they're going to enjoy this kind of format. And maybe I'll give one to my husband too and try to make him read it.
Well, that's yeah. It is definitely for people with a quirky sense of humor. As much as I would love
Mhm.
to say, everyone will love this, everyone
Mhm.
won't love this, but the right person really might. I
Mhm.
think, I hope.
I think I have a couple of right people in my life that will love it. All right, well, it was wonderful talking to you today.
That was great talking to you. Thank you.
Read and Write Podcast is edited and produced by Deborah Z. Barth. Music was provided by Lo-Fi Girl and can be found at lofigirl.com or on their YouTube channel. Audio effects were created by Red Octopus and Black River Phonogram. Show notes and previous episodes can be found at readandwritepodcast.com.